All right. Hello and welcome to the podcast, Eat Better Food Today. I'm your host, Ken Cunningham, and I'm excited to be sharing insights on why we believe that health and longevity begins with the food we eat. The goal of this podcast will be to inspire, educate, and enable folks to live a healthier life and do it affordably. My wife and I have been on this journey for over 10 years and continue to work on it every single day. Percent of the profits from this podcast we put towards child hunger with an initial focus on the poorest suburb in America, East Cleveland, Ohio. As a reminder, please subscribe to this podcast. Be sure to visit my website, Eat Better Food Today, for links to the show, videos, and all the recipes, books, and articles that our guests provide. On this episode, we're grateful to have Will Harris. Will is a sixth-generation South Georgian farmer whose farm, White Oak Pastures, was established in 1866. The farm in Bluffton, Georgia, moved from a factory farm in 1995 to now allow livestock to express their instinctive behavior, mitigate climate change, rebuild healthy soil, and revitalize the backbone of America. We'll get into all those details here in a couple minutes. Will has been interviewed on Rogan, ABC, NBC, the BBC, NPR, Forbes, to name a few, and has written a book called A Bold Return to Giving a Damn. As Will has said publicly, building relationships with the people growing your food is the only way we can really know what we're buying. So I've got a copy of your book here I bought yesterday, so I look forward to reading that after we talk. The conversation will build on, I've had three previous Ohio regenerative farmers in conversations here as well that are kind of about 30 miles outside of Cleveland in different directions. So this will kind of build on that conversation as well. So I want to thank you for joining us. Thank your daughter, Jenny, for kind of helping us out here. And my first question is always about breakfast. So I will still believe the good start to a day is a healthy breakfast. So I'm just curious what you had for breakfast this morning.
Thank you for having me on your show, Ken. And for breakfast this morning, I had the same thing I have every morning. That's a triple order of bacon and a cup of coffee. Yeah.
A triple order of bacon, okay. Yeah. Any eggs with that?
No, your eggs are fine, but if you get plenty of bacon, I don't know why you want to eat an
egg. Outstanding. So what are some of your other morning routines that you have there on the farm once you get up and get going?
We raise cows, hogs, sheep, goats, rabbits, poultry. We have a garden. We've got about 170 employees, so there's a lot going on here 7 days a week, and we're vertically integrated. We have a USDA red meat slaughter plant and a USDA inspected poultry slaughter plant on the farm. We also have a store and a restaurant and lodging. There's a lot of stuff going on here all the time, and it's a lot of fun. It really is.
So why did you decide to make the change? So basically, you grew up on your farm. Your dad kind of had, as I've kind of read online, kind of put down nitrogen every year from 1946 to 1995, and then you decided you wanted to make a change, and that's kind of what you just described as kind of the end result of that change. So what made you want to move from what you were doing in the past to what you're doing today?
My dad took over the farm after World War II, and he was the first generation to really industrialize, commoditize, centralize the operation of this farm. It had been run by his father, my grandfather, and by his father, my great-grandfather, for nearly 100 years prior to that. And under Dad's watch, he narrowed the scope of it, not the scale, but the scope, and it became just a cattle operation, a monocultural cattle operation.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very good at that, and he operated it profitably. And I grew up all my life. It was a monocultural cattle operation. The multi-species part of it ended before I was born, and I loved what my dad did. I never wanted to do anything except run this farm as a monocultural cattle operation. I went to the University of Georgia, majored in animal science, came back, graduated in 1976, came back and helped him run it. Eventually ran it myself for 20 years as a industrial cattle operation, nothing but cattle. And in the but by the mid 90s, I really had become increasingly disillusioned with that, the impact that that had on animal welfare and the environment, the farm, the land, the water. So I started moving away from it, and have been moving away from it for 30 years.
So I was reading something yesterday, and the comment was made: without risk, nothing happens. When you made that change, you borrowed $7.5 million to make that change. You couldn't have taken that very lightly to kind of move in a new direction and borrow all that money.
Well, I certainly, I was a very novice money borrower. I never borrowed any money. I inherited a paid for farm, a little bit of cash, and made money every year. Not only we were rich people, we were not, but the farm was profitable. I went back and we made money every year that I ran it industrially and lived comfortably, not exorbitantly, but comfortably. When when I made the decision I didn't want to do it industrially anymore, I was pretty immature in my uh, study of what I should do differently, and I was able to borrow the money. Probably couldn't have done that today, but in that era you could. So I borrowed the money and built the buildings. I just started doing it, and I was so incredibly lucky. Uh, I built my first slaughter plant in the very early 2000s, and that was when grass-fed beef was first becoming discussed in the food media.
Mm-hmm.
But you couldn't get any. I mean, nobody had it. None of the grocery companies had grass-fed beef because it was such a new concept. And I was able to sell Whole Foods Market and Public Supermarket the first pound of American grass-fed beef that they bought and marketed as American grass-fed beef.
Mm.
And that was just so lucky. I mean, I would love to tell you I saw that coming and planned for it, but that's not what happened. I made up my mind to do what I wanted to do, and the timing just accommodated it beautifully. Thank you, Lord. And we had some good years. They weren't all good years, but for the first 10 years or so, we did really well.
Outstanding. So do you still have those relationships with Whole Foods and others? Is that?
I don't. Whole Foods, they say I quit doing business with them. I say they dropped me. I'm not sure exactly how that all occurred, but after the Amazon purchase, it changed a lot.
Okay.
And we I couldn't make money with it anymore. I simply could not make a profit. And we all of this was occurring about the time the pandemic hit, and we started selling online. I put in an order fulfillment center. We started selling food through FedEx and UPS. With the Oak Pastures is our website. You can order online, and that has been last year. Year ending December 23, we actually sold more product online than we sold any other way. Grocery, food service, our store, our restaurant, all added together, we sold more online. I think that's kind of the future for us.
Nice. Very nice. So some of the background that I looked into on you talk about that our current food production system is destructive. Can you kind of explain your thoughts on why that is?
Yes.
Because I agree 100%, by the way.
So we strongly believe that Regenerative farm practices means following the cycles of nature.
Mm-hmm.
The cycles of nature are, to name a few, the water cycle, the mineral cycle, the microbial cycle, weather cycle, energy cycle, on and on, infinite. The cycles of nature. And when those cycles of nature are operating optimally, an abundance is produced. You think about all of the coal and oil and natural gas that's in the ground or that we pumped out of the ground from the era of the dinosaur when the cycles of nature were just operating optimally.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where wealth comes from. It's the abundance that's generated when the cycles of nature are operating optimally. And the way the way my dad started farming and the way I started farming, we were all about breaking the cycles of nature, not optimizing the cycles of nature, breaking them. We wanted a monoculture of nothing out there but cattle eating nothing but Tifton 85 Bermuda grass. And if you were in our pasture, his, later my pasture, and you were not a cow or Tifton 85 Bermuda grass, we used a side on you: pesticide, herbicide, insecticide, nematicide. Side means kill. And when I was operating this farm as a monoculture of cattle, I went to the pasture every day looking for something to kill.
Hmm.
That is now I go to the pasture every day. I just came in before I called you, and I'm looking for ways to keep things alive.
It's a better approach. Definitely a better approach. So you've also been quoted as saying that our current food system is very fragile. What do you mean by it's very fragile?
I think that the operating of our food to come from operations that operate as a monoculture is very fragile. I think that monocultures fly in the face of nature. Nature's about many different species of plants and animals and microbes operating in symbiotic relationships with each other,
Mm-hmm.
spinning off this abundance. That's what we live on. And we've come way from that. And by the way, again, I was the son of a monocultural cattleman. I was a monocultural cattleman. I majored in that at the University of Georgia. I mean, I was part of the problem before I was part of the solution.
Well, now you're part of the solution, because a lot of people starting to listen to you and kind of follow that regenerative path, which is.
Well, I hope so. It's difficult. It is very hard for an industrial farmer to change, to just decide to change his operation.
Mm-hmm.
I did, but it was 30 years ago, and there's a lot of stuff different than then. I've seen a lot of people become aware of the problems of the production model they're part of, but the business, it just is, for them to change up is not good business. They just have too much investment in their current production model.
So how do you can you define kind of regenerative for all the listeners here? I know you mentioned kind of three areas that are regenerative: animal welfare, regeneration, rural revitalization. But I guess kind of define what's your definition of regenerative farming, I guess.
Well, it's moving away from that commodity industrial model that we discussed earlier, moving away from that, moving back more to a natural production system, which is a polycultural, many species.
Yeah, and you started with cattle, and now you've got sheep, you've got goats, you mentioned you've got some crops, you mentioned rabbits. I mean, you've got a lot of different animals. I've read that you've got bald eagles now that visit your farm. I mean, you've got a whole new ecosystem there versus just cattle and pesticides.
It is so different from the ecosystem is different from what it was 20 plus
Mm-hmm.
years ago when I my neighbors who are my friends and relatives did not. They still farm very industrially, and you can tell to the row where they end and we begin. And I'm sure they think what they do is beautiful, and that's fine. I think what I do is beautiful, and I'm pretty sure I'm right, and I guess they may think they're right. So it's okay. It's fine. But,
You're
you
still
know,
friends.
so yeah, the the industrial food production model that feeds us does produce very cheap food.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it I feel like it produces cheap food by spinning the cost off to others. There's a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico that would cost probably billions of dollars to fix, and the pesticide companies and fertilizer companies and farmers that cause that won't pay for it. We'll all pay for it. When we the way we farm causes many different species to go into extinction or near extinction. And I think that has a cost, but the pesticide companies won't pay it. We'll all pay it. And I can go on and on, climate change, whatever you want to talk about. There are just many costs that result from the industrialization of our food production system. and but they're not paid by the perpetrators, they're paid by everybody. But the result is really cheap food. And I'm glad that we have access to really cheap food, even though I recognize the ills that come from it. There are poor people on the planet that can't afford to eat, and I want, excuse me, I want them to eat. I don't want them hungry. And while I'm not happy with industrial food, I am happy that there are less hungry people because they have access to it. I think we should do things very differently, but I do not want anybody to be hungry.
Yeah, I don't want anybody to be hungry either. I mean, I think there's a lot of solutions, and one of the things that you kind of mentioned, regenerative agriculture is not very scalable, but it is very replicable. So it's part of what I'll post at the end of, when we post this podcast. There's resources out there, things online you can go to find basically who the regenerative farmers are in your area. So it's just something that will kind of contribute to this conversation as well. And we just need more people doing that. I mean, it's not hard for people to put a garden in their backyard and just grow a few crops too. That feeds people and can eat in the winter. I mean, there are solutions to the problem. So
We'll sell probably close to $30 million worth of product this year. Produce and sell $30 million worth of product.
nice.
And we ship it to 48 states. And I don't want to do that. I need to produce that amount of stuff because I built all these processing plants, and I got to do that much volume. But I want to sell it as locally as I can.
Yeah.
And I want other people in the Northeast and the Northwest and the South, Mid America. I want there to be a lot of white oak pastures that are locally owned and operated and feeding the people of their communities. They even at $30 million in volume, that's not enough to feed Atlanta, much less Atlanta and Jacksonville and Tampa. That I sit in the middle of those three cities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that would be good. If we can get more and more farms like white oak farms kind of across the country, then you're right. Then we kind of feed everybody more locally. And I think it's happening based on the people that I talk to on the show, people that I talk to off the show. I think there's definitely more and more interest in what, the regenerative farming approach. And I think more and more people are starting to get into that area. There's one farmer that I interviewed, and he's about a half hour south of Cleveland here. And he not only has a regenerative farm similar to yours, smaller scale, but he is teaching farmers. He brings in farmers every year to teach young people how to farm so they can do what he's doing, which is outstanding.
I'm glad to hear that. We formed a 501c3 as well
Okay.
for that purpose. It's called CFAR, Center for Agricultural Resilience. And we've hired a gifted young executive director, and we have sessions here in Bluffton on the farm to teach people how to do what we do. And it's not a big deal, but I think it's a very good deal.
Nice. Very
We
nice.
also have an internship program. We bring in 6 interns for 3 months, 4 times a year.
Hmm.
And it's just been incredible the number of talented people we've had here in Bluffton, Georgia, from all over the world, literally. And I, and of course they come here and learn. Sometimes they stay here a while and work for us, but most often they go and start something somewhere else.
Wow, that's very nice. And so you're getting people from all over the world, not just from Georgia, not just from the U.S., but
Literally, we've had people from Spain and Turkey and Ireland and a number of places.
nice.
Australia.
So you also mentioned that over kind of with your new approach here, that the soil that you have now, the percent of organic matter in the soils, gone from 0.5% to 5% over the last 15 years. So how is that happening? I know the answer to the question, but I'm just, if you can share with the listeners kind of how you've kind of rebuilt the soil from that monoculture to, all this different variety of things you're doing on the farm today.
Yeah, I can tell you how we do it. But first, I want to call your attention to the fact that the numbers you said, 0.5% over 5%.
Over.
That's a 10x increase.
Yes, yes.
It's just tiny numbers, but it's a 10x increase, and it's important because now organic matter is what we're talking about. It's not all that matters. It's not. It's just one component of soil health.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a great indicator and a measurable indicator of soil health improvement. And a 1% organic matter soil will hold an inch of rainfall. That's about 27,000 gallons of water per acre. So if you've
Okay.
got a half an inch, a 0.5% organic matter, it's only going to absorb, your land's only going to absorb a half-inch rainfall. If it's 5%, it'll absorb a 5-inch rainfall, and we get 5-inch rainfalls in Bluffton, Georgia. So it's just very important, and it's a great indicator. But the way you do it is, in our case, we depend upon perennial grasses. Then we oversee those perennial grasses with annual grasses in the wintertime.
Mm-hmm.
That's what works for us here in the coastal plain of Georgia. If you want to know the geography, it would be a different pattern, but that's what we do. It's beautiful. The grass grows, and our grass will grow to a depth of 6-8 inches in about 60 days in the summertime.
Wow.
And when it's growing, all that volume comes from the atmosphere. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the plant is breathing in carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases and building that plant material above the ground. But it's also building an equal amount of plant material below the ground, the roots. You
Mm-hmm.
see it grow this up here, it's growing just as much down there.
Hmm.
Then we graze it every 60 days. We bring our herds through, and it's a pretty intense grazing event. We hit it really hard for one day. And that's important. You want to really bite off the uh, plant material above the ground in one day, and then we'll be off of it for at least 60 days to give it a chance to regrow. And that plant works like a carbon pump. It's pulling these greenhouse gases in, building forage on the top and roots on the bottom. The animals bite it off at the top, turn that into manure that they deposit back down. And then the roots will slough off a bit until it starts back growing. So the plant is literally operating like a pump. It's just
Hmm.
beautiful. It's incredible to me that the militant vegetarians and vegans have convinced so many people that cattle are destroying our environment. That's just amazing to me. And we cattlemen, we did it ourselves because we started raising cattle in confinement where that beautiful carbon pump I just described for you is not working. And the messaging has been beautiful from these militants, and they just convinced people that cattle are horrible for the environment. But I'm telling you that cattle are the most ruminants, not just cattle, sheep, goats, ruminants, are the most cost-effective way to correct the environmental damage that we've done.
Yeah, and I've read, so you would also published some information. It kind of said, so grass-fed cows store 3.5 pounds of carbon in the soil for every pound of beef versus industrial farming, kind of what you did prior to 1995, releases 3.5 pounds of carbon in the atmosphere. So it's completely the opposite. I mean, what you're doing is completely the opposite of what factory farming is doing. And it's kind of like you just described, it's helping the environment just because of the process you just described.
And those numbers that you're quoting didn't come from me anecdotally.
Okay.
It came from me, but I was quoting a life cycle analysis that was done by an environmental engineering company called Qantas
Uh-huh.
from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And those environmental engineers were not. They didn't come down here to make Will look good. They came to do a scientific study.
Mm-hmm.
They did, and the scientific study was what you said. Our cattle operation actually sequesters 3.5 pounds of carbon in the soil for every pound of beef that we sell. It's beautiful, and you can see it. You don't have to take anybody's word for it. When we were sort of challenged to let those people come in and do that, and I didn't know how it was going to work out, but I had the confidence to do it because I dig in my soil all the time, and I see it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I can see the land changing colors. I mean, it's not quick, but it's very reliable.
Very nice. So one of the other things that you've kind of done there with the change in approach to regenerative farming. So you kind of read that, Bluffton was once a town of about 50. I think the census said 102, but you were saying like 50 people. You now have the number keeps going up because I read 120, then I read 150. You just said 170 at the beginning of the show here. So you've revitalized that town. I mean, you're buying houses, you're renovating them. I mean, my opinion, you've created like a middle America miracle down there with what you're doing. I mean, you're not only helping the environment, producing, healthy products, but you're also rebuilding that town there. So I guess what are some of your thoughts? I mean, you seem to continue to grow based on because the numbers keep growing as far as what's going on there. I mean, when people come down and visit, it sounds like you've just taken what was a decaying town, brought on by industrialization to a thriving community now with everything that you're doing down there. I mean, I applaud you for that. So, um, what else can you share for people, I guess, that want to do that in other towns across America? Because I think that kind of success is going to help encourage and inspire people to want to do what you're doing in other places, like we talked about earlier in the country here. So, what are some of your thoughts there?
I am sitting right now in the 100-and-something-year-old Bluffton courthouse, one-room wooden courthouse that's
Uh-huh.
not a courthouse anymore. It's my office. And it sits in the middle of Bluffton, and Bluffton sits in the middle of my farm. This farm is 3,200 acres. Bluffton's right in the middle of it. And when I made up my mind to move away from the monocultural industrial model, Bluffton was not part of the equation. I mean, the land and the animals were the equation.
Mm-hmm.
And but Bluffton wound up being really impacted by it. And I went from having, when I was farming industrially, 3, maybe 4 minimum wage employees to today 170 or so employees that make well above the county average. I wish my people made more,
Uh-huh.
but Bluffton is the poorest county in the United States of America, or Clay County is. It was in 2020. And our people make well above the county average. My payroll is about $100,000 a week,
Mm. Wow.
and 52 weeks a year. And all my employees are, with one except one remote employee. Everybody else is local. They live here or
Mm-hmm.
in and around Bluffton. And that has had a great economic impact, and it wasn't part of my plan. Again, my plan was the land of the animals. And I can remember I had a visitor here one day 15 years ago or so, and we met up here in Bluffton, in the town of Bluffton, and we'd gotten through. He said, "This is a nice little town," and I was waiting for the punchline, and he was serious. And I said, this is a nice little town. But it has gone from being a ghost town to being a nice little town. This Bluffton's nice. I wish you'd come see us. I wish everybody listening would come see us. We have bought just about every house and lot and vacant stores is sold in the last 15 or 20 years. And we fixed them up for employees or others. Lodging, you can come stay with us in one of these houses. And it's just turned into a nice little town. And what's interesting to me is this transition from ghost town to very nice little town was done without government money or some rich philanthropic person. This was just a very normal working family business,
Uh-huh.
and it just shows that the ills, the negative things that have come from the centralization of agriculture, the money just gets sucked through here so quick.
Mm-hmm.
To go to big multinational food companies or fertilizer companies or pesticide companies that so little of it stays here that it becomes impoverished. And I didn't realize all that till I lived it. But now that I've lived it, I see that all of these impoverished little farm towns can be fixed
Mm-hmm.
without a lot of government money or philanthropic money or whatever that money comes from.
Well, and I went to a session in DC a couple of weeks ago, and it had a variety of government agencies, federal government agencies, but it also had a lot of private agencies. And I'll just say that there is a realization kind of at a government level and a grassroots level that things need to change and start moving in the direction that you're talking about. So, I mean, I agree with you. You've been successful. Other people can be successful without, government help or anything. But at least, again, this is more and more people, including the government, are starting to realize this is important.
And I'm not asking anybody to take my word for it. I'm asking you to come out here and look at it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's not a hypothesis or a theory. It's I can show you exactly what's happened here.
Mm-hmm.
And these ghost towns, impoverished towns, disappearing towns. That's not a southern thing. It's an agricultural thing. I mean, it's
Yeah.
all over this country.
Yeah.
Depending on what percentage of the town, city's business was agriculture. In Bluffton, we've never had a railroad, never had a factory. It's purely agrarian economy.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see it more clearly here. Many towns are heavily agrarian. They might have had mining or tourism or some manufacturing, other things that helped hide the economic devastation that came from industrializing agriculture.
So it's, I guess, explain more, because again, the part of this conversation is to get people to, think more about doing what you're doing. So people can go visit. You said you had programs, kind of like internships that people can take advantage of. What other things can people do? Because the small family farm in the U.S. is still makes up 89% of what is farmed here in the U.S. But unfortunately, they're only contributing 20% of the food supply. So there's still a lot of small family farms. They're just not, to your point, industrial farming is kind of supplying all the inexpensive food out there from the large factory farms. So what can these small, because there are still, my point is there's still a lot of small farmers out there. What can they be doing, or how can you help them? What can you teach them to kind of change?
Well, I think, first of all, I'll say I think I've seen more movement in this direction from non-farmers than from farmers.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I understand that. The people who are farming around me and around the country are committed to a way of doing business. When I say committed to it, I mean a lot of different things. They committed because this is what their granddad did.
Mm-hmm.
Committed because it's what they really know how to do well.
Mm-hmm.
Committed because of the investment. A cotton picker cost $1 million.
Wow. No, I did not.
A modern cotton picker costs $1 million.
Hmm.
A combine's not much cheaper, and they have huge investments in this equipment that they've got to run it.
Right. Right.
And many of them, my friends and neighbors here, are vertically integrated. They own a share of the cotton gin. They own a share of the peanut shelling plant. They own a share of the grain elevator. So they're just almost irrevocably financially committed to that industrial farm model. And it would be very difficult for them to rethink it. Whereas a person who doesn't have that commitment, but has access to land, inherits some land, or has access to some land. Of course, land is the key, and land is hard to come by. Land is, I don't know if you've ever thought about this or not, but there are not many non-depreciating assets. I guess precious metals, gold, silver, gems, diamonds, rubies, emeralds, maybe art. I don't know anything about art, but those are assets that if you acquire them, they're non-depreciating. They'll hold their value.
Right.
Land is like that.
Mm-hmm.
A truck or a building, house, all these things depreciate. But land doesn't depreciate. But when you buy land, if you go to the bank to buy land, they're going to want you to pay for it in 20 years. And it's going to last forever.
Right.
You got to pay for it in 20 years. And I bought a good bit of land, and it's hard to pay for. You have to have a lot going on to make that work. And now, non-farmers are focused on acquiring land. You know the names of the big multi-millionaire, billionaires that are acquiring land.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how all that's going to manifest itself.
And what are they doing with that land? I've read about, some of those purchases are large, but are they going to take your approach, or are they going to take the former approach that you had?
I don't know. I know of some of them, and I don't know of anyone who's taking this kind of approach. There may be some. I'm not saying they're not. I have not done a study on that, but I do know a lot of big farming outfits or big big landowning outfits are focused on industrial production.
Have you talked to people or so you kind of had that environmentalist come down, look at your soil, but have you had any conversations around the food that you're producing and the health benefits of that versus the alternative, meaning factory farms and the health, I'll say the health negatives of that way of farming?
There are a lot of people that I trust who are health professionals or nutrition professionals, and the people that sought to have that high level of professionalism, and I believe their teachings. Now, I made the decision a long time ago to go through my website and pull out everything in there that wasn't about the land, the animals, and the rural economy.
Okay.
Because I am an expert in land and animals and rural economy. And I'm not an expert in health and those other attributes that people talk about. And there's a lot of them out there that are, and I certainly believe what they say. But I tell you, I went to an event one time. I was to speak, and the farmer spoke before me. And he stood up there and talked about the health and safety attributes of his product, and I just realized that he was just that's the same as me. He was just quoting what he heard others say, and I made the decision to change my messaging to the things I felt that I knew more about than most people, the land, the animals, and the rural economy.
Okay. So do you do anything? One of the things we're working on here in East Cleveland, so suburb of Cleveland, is trying to get better, healthier food into some of these disadvantaged neighborhoods. Are you doing anything down there with what you've been doing with children or schools? Or I know you're teaching, you've got a center to teach farmers and stuff, but anything on the children's side of things, I guess?
No, I'm not, but I'm glad that you are. It's a real concern of mine that my food costs more than the what I consider inferior industrial food.
Right.
But I can't afford to raise it and sell it for what they sell in inferior industrial food for. So there's got to be someone who knows more than I know has got to figure that out. I'm glad you're working on it. And anything we can do to help, we will.
Thank you.
When we absorb all the cost of food production, you can't sell it for the same price as those who export the cost of food production. And I don't know the answer to that. I want everybody to have access to good food. Rich folks, poor folks, all folks.
Yep.
But I do not have the answer for that.
Well, I guess I'll make two comments on that. One, I think the subsidies are available to factory farms. You need to have those same subsidies available for regenerative farming. That's one comment. Two, I'll put you in touch. There's a regenerative farmer up here in just, again, south of Cleveland that he actually is selling. He has crops, and he has a pretty much smaller version of what you have. But he also has a storefront in Cleveland, and his pricing for his meat products, pork, lamb, beef, is pretty competitive, and chicken, pretty competitive with local grocery stores here. So I'm not sure how he's doing that, but I'd be happy to connect you with him just to have that conversation.
That'd be interesting.
All right, so you've done a lot, a lot in what you've done in that town and with that farm. What's next for you? What are you thinking about for the future here over the next 2 to 5 years here, I guess?
Well, it's not to just grow and grow and grow. That's not the goal.
Okay.
The goal is to become better at what we do. We have evolved this. I I still own 100% of White Oak Pastures, but I do not run it as autonomously as I used to.
Mm-hmm.
There's a time I was the only decision maker on White Oak Pastures, and everybody at White Oak Pastures worked for Will. And we've changed that. We've got a management team, 4 family members, 5 counting me, 2 non-family members. Those 7 directors supervise 26, I think, managers who supervise the other 130 people that are left. So we put a little structure to it, and it works a lot better.
Nice, nice.
We are doing some things. We're right now we're putting in a large freezer at our red meat plant and poultry plant. When I built all that, I was purely grocery, so it was purely fresh product. Now we have an order fulfillment center, and it's mostly frozen product.
Okay.
So we freeze it immediately when we process it. So
Uh-huh.
I call it fresh frozen. But it's we're that's a big deal for us, and we're doing that right now. We're about to change up my poultry plant. We When I built my poultry plant, I thought I could sell poultry as readily as I've been selling beef and pork and lamb,
Uh-huh.
but I can't sell as much. Pasture poultry, the price difference in pasture poultry and industrial poultry is greater than pork and beef. So
Okay.
we're renovating the plant. I'm still going to be able to process poultry there, but I can also process sheep, goats, and pigs in the poultry plant,
Mm-hmm.
which will enable me to process more cattle in the red meat plant.
Uh-huh.
And then the third thing we're doing that's a big deal is we're putting in a solar voltaic array to power the whole thing. I got a little bit of solar voltaic now. We're going to put in enough to power the whole plant. And it's going to be what's called a cattle tracker, high enough off the ground that the cattle can graze under it.
Uh-huh.
So these are 3 big ticket items that won't increase our volume, but it'll increase the quality of what we do.
Nice, nice. Well, if you get that solar farm set up, then you won't have to pay for electricity. You'll be generating that yourself. So there'll be some savings there over time.
Correct. And the source of the electricity, it'll be solar, not uh, uh, diesel powered.
Uh-huh. Nice. So you've done a lot over the last 20, 30 years here. What would you say, just kind of looking back on it, what's your proudest accomplishment to this point?
Probably the fact that 2 of my 3 children and their spouses chose to come back. I had 3 daughters, and I never, and whereas all my childhood, all I ever wanted to do was come back and run the farm.
Uh-huh.
My daughters weren't raised that way. They got a good mama, and they were at piano lessons and voice lessons and softball and karate and dance and all those things. They weren't with me on the farm, and I never thought they'd come back to the farm. And they wouldn't have, but when I changed the farm, it made it attractive for them. And my 2 daughters and their spouses that came back are in their 30s, and they've got 5 children. One's got 2 children, one's got 3 children.
Uh-huh.
So we're kind of set up for another generation. They'll be operating this farm for another 30 years.
Nice.
And then who knows what will happen after that? But it'll be one more generation on the books.
Fantastic. That is something to be very proud of. Any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with before I ask you what your favorite meal is?
I don't know what you people want to hear, but I'll say this: we love having company. We love showing people what we do. So I invite you and all your listeners to come to White Oak Pastures in Bluffton, Georgia. It's not right on the way anywhere, but we'd love to have you down.
All right. Well, my wife and I will definitely pay you a visit sometime in the next year here. Absolutely come down and visit. So thank you
Great,
for that invitation.
great.
All right. So what would you say your favorite, I'm going to say easy to make meal is that a family could, do at home?
You know, I'm a beef guy. You know, and I I gotta say that probably meatloaf is about as good as anything you can serve me. I mean, I love steak. Everybody loves steak. I love roast. I love all these things. But there's just so much you can do with meatloaf, and I could probably eat it, every night for supper. I told you to eat bacon every morning for breakfast. I could eat meatloaf every night for supper in perpetuity. It'd be like a meal.
Nice, nice. Anything specific in the meatloaf besides your meat?
Not too much ketchup. I mean, they put way too much ketchup on it. I usually scrape it off first thing.
All right, very good. Well, Will, thank you very much for being on the show. I'm going to close with just one other. So I mentioned I'm going to post on the website where people can kind of click and then try to find, regenerative farmers in their area. So there's a couple of sites that have that. The other thing I'm going to post is from a produce standpoint in the Midwest. I'm not sure if it's the same down in your neck of the woods, but basically right now is like high season to get local fresh produce. So there's a website that I'm going to post. You can basically pull down by state, put in the month, and it'll say, here's all the fresh produce that's available locally through either your grocery store or a farmer's market or, directly from a farmer itself. So that's kind of something we're adding at the end of every show here, and also be posting on the website so people can get good, fresh, regenerative, meat products, and then they can also get, fresh, locally sourced foods as well from a produce standpoint. So,
Thank, thank you for having me on your show, Ken. I
yeah,
appreciate it.
thank you. I really appreciate this. I mean, your story is absolutely amazing, and I hope this inspires more people to come visit you, do the internships, learn more about what you're doing, and start doing it themselves. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right.